Namaste and in lak'ech. Hi, I'm Zen Benefiel and welcome to One World in a New World. Now those two phrases, one means the divine within me recognizes the divine within you, and the other means I am another you. So together we can share a great planet and do a lot of really cool things when we can see each other in those perspectives. So I'd like to welcome to the show Fyodor Ovchinnikov, who I met through Thought Leadership for Systems Transformation series that he's putting together or has put together through the Institute of Evolutionary Leadership, which is a really cool institute. He's brought a lot of people from around the world who are pioneers in systems transformation. So in today's world, that's really what we need to look at. There's a lot of people who are involved in this kind of field right now because of the needs that we have and what we're going through collectively on the planet. The virtual world has opened that up to some really phenomenal conversations, interactions, and even group projects that are in process as we speak. It's a really cool thing. Fyodor, welcome to the show. Now, please.
Great. Thank you, Zen. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to give just a little bit more about your background. You've got a Master of Arts in International Business from Lomonosov
University,
Moscow State University. And you've also gone around and visited Stanford, and University of Chicago, and the Shenzhen Polytechnic. So you've been around in the educational field. And I would imagine that's brought you into a really well-rounded place. The meeting that we had initially, and I was kind of, I was reflecting on, how did I find you, right? Or what kind of happened? It was one of those moments where, there's this kind of intention to connect with people, and you showed up, and the program was just enticing. And so I got involved, and I've had a really enjoyable time so far. Now, what enabled that to happen was you co-founded the Institute for Evolutionary Leadership with Manuel Manga some years ago. How did that take place? What was going on in your life, and what were you thinking, at least as far as your mission and purpose, and how you might engage that, and what showed up as a result?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Zen. Happy to share part of some of the stories. Yeah. So first of all, just let me put it out there that it's really me supporting Manuel Manga with founding the institute, and because Manuel came up with the concept of evolutionary leadership and with the competences when I was in elementary school somewhere on the vestiges of the Soviet Union. So he's really been doing this work for a long time, and I hope that you will have a chance to interview him as well about his story, which is super rich. Yeah. So, but I'll share more about how we got connected, and then I just want to clarify that my master's degree as well as bachelor's degree from the same university, which is Moscow, Lomonosov Moscow State University, Institute of Asian and African Studies is part of that university. So okay. It's not an international business, it's an international economic relations. So it's macroeconomics. It's not organizations.
Okay.
Which is important.
Corrected. Thank you for that.
No, but that is important because
Absolutely.
One of the threads in my journey deals with my master's studies. So I was, that's when I actually got familiar with the systems thinking for the first time, and the complexity and all that. And I was given this interesting challenge by my academic supervisor to study resilience of the socioeconomic system of China in comparison with those of other countries. Very quickly I realized that it's one thing to predict something that is a result of unsustainable trends. So there's some structural inequalities or imbalances that have certain dynamics that are leading to a collapse or to a breakdown.
Sure.
And you can
from a
pretty
distance,
much,
those are probably fairly easy to observe, right?
exactly, yeah. So it's fairly easy to observe, it's fairly easy to quantify and show, and that's cool. But also, the interconnectedness of the social, the ecological, the economic, and all that. It's much more complex, and it's those emergent properties of that, those relationships that I found for myself that I got fascinated by. So I wrote this philosophical paper for the philosophy course, which was called something like in English, something like socioeconomic studies in search of a subject. And where I explored what economic system actually is for myself, right? Philosophical, right. What is it? What is the ontology of that? And at that point, I was kind of reinventing the wheel, because people like John Searle and others had articulated some of the ideas that I consider my personal discoveries. Like, they had articulated that decades before I even got there.
Do you find also that as you're on this path to discovery, right, with this intent to discover, that once you do, then you start looking around and you look for corroboration or reflection of others, and you find, oh wow, others have been down this path too. Cool. Now I'm on it with them.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that happened to me later. So I had to table this at that point, because one of my personal discoveries for myself was that actually we are co-creating socioeconomic system. We're not just objective observers of a given reality that we don't impact. So we just need to describe and study.
Well, I forget who it was that said it, but there was a scientist that said when the observer affects the experiment.
Yeah, I think that probably comes from quantum physics, when you have this wave versus particle thing, that which basically is,
we'll wave at each other until we get solid.
Even in physics, but in social sciences also, the school of thought that I was brought up into, like, academically, is that we have world development indicators and national statistics and all this kind of stuff, and we had actually very good teachers. Like one of my teachers, who was a teacher of my academic advisor, they came up with purchasing power parity in the Soviet Union before the West, but they didn't get published because, according to that idea, the quality of life in oppressed developing, like the developing countries, post-colonial countries, the quality of life was a little bit better than people thought it would be. And the party basically said, look, like, you're undermining our fight against capitalism and colonialism, so this is no-go, right? And then the entire world started using purchasing power parity as opposed to exchange rates to determine per capita GDP and things like that. So, like, that particular professor was very, not just knowledgeable, but wise in terms of what the numbers actually are and how they may be irrelevant or distorting the picture. So I had this very good relationship with numbers, I would say, that is more systemic and less reductionistic in some sense. But it was not enough for me to actually explore questions of our active participation in the act of creation of social realities.
Right.
So that was a discovery for me personally when I was working on this paper, and I was fascinated by it. And
so
my
what were the internal...
loved it, but my academic advisor tabled it. So I had actually to wait a few years before I got back to that. Right.
Which, sometimes that it's that creative flow that just gets put on pause for a little bit while something else needs to be done that we're not necessarily aware of, or that is required for the moment before we can move on. Right. It's systematized, and there's processes and protocols and rhythms and patterns and everything. We just don't necessarily recognize them in process as we're experiencing them.
That's very true. Yeah.
And I don't think, a lot of people think that's woo, but there's science in that. There's science in math and numbers and what you're talking about. When you are able to recognize these patterns, then you can affect them in some way through participation in the co-creation, right? So what were the internal things that were going on inside of you as to what to do with this information, and how you saw yourself being able to move in the world with that?
Yeah. So yeah, that is that is just, I think, to understand a little bit more about internal things. I think I should mention two other threads, and one of it was the work I was doing in intercultural communication, using the understanding that I had, the understanding of Chinese culture, and I had, you noticed Shenzhen Polytechnic. I was, I was sent to that. We always have, or almost always, a year in the country that we're studying, between bachelor's and master's degree in that university. In that particular major. My friends were going to Beijing University and Tsinghua University, and it was well-known universities in China. And I was sent to Shenzhen Polytechnic, which was no-name university, like college actually, with like 10 years in existence. I was like, what the hell? I'm graduating with honors. Why the hell are you sending me there? What did I do wrong?
Right.
And then I remember a professor who was teaching political structure and social system of China. So he was like, asked me for a walk. It's like, something is going on there culturally, and you seem like somebody who listened to what I was talking about, even when I taught.
Sure.
So we really want you to look into that. So I ended up negotiating on behalf of Moscow University with the administration of the receiving institution and solving some cultural issues in the process. And then they signed an agreement that I suggested, an additional agreement and stuff like that. And then that was a very interesting experience. I was actually offered a job at that university to be responsible for relationships with all Russian universities, but I had to go to get my master's degree because I already paid for it.
Well, and that showed that you did very well at creating those relationships.
Yeah, but you see, but then the downside of it was, I was fascinated by that. It was like really wonderful experience being able to do the code switching and understanding. But when I started working for clients and consulting, with an organization I founded, at some point I realized that what we ended up doing, we were helping Russian clients take advantage of cultural differences. Because we were talking about relationships, and that's great, but the purpose of an organization, if it's a corporation, is to make profit. So basically, the success criteria for what we were doing was like reliable, reliable delivery, lower prices. Really, I'm making sure that things work well for the Russian side.
Right, and all the economic components of furthering business.
So, right. And then while I was doing that work, I was really connecting to the common humanity of my Chinese friends. And I became really fascinated by what is beneath beyond the culture, what unites us. And to one of your questions in the program, right? Right. The culture is important. And, one particular example, and I think that also relates indirectly, at least, to your question about inner dimension. Is that early on during that study abroad period, I remember we were staying and waiting for a bus on a hot day with another Russian friend, and some Chinese friends were nearby. And my Russian friend and I started talking about what would have happened if Newton didn't have this apple being dropped on his head. Okay. And this is a myth, but still, it would be nice to fantasize about how different the world would be, and whether somebody else gravity or discovered gravity and things like that. And we were talking about that casually, as many Russians do. It's like something we do casually. It's part of our culture. It's totally fine. And then one of our Chinese friends asked us what we're talking about in Russian, and we translated it to him. He was like, "Oh my God, is it normal for you guys in Russia to talk about this stuff?" It was like, "Yeah, totally. It's it's like what we do." And he's like, if somebody here started talking about that, people would think the guy's crazy, right? And it's like, yeah, we know it's like, a little bit different cultural attitude. But then he became quiet for a moment, and he paused. He said, but sometimes I have these ideas that I I cannot share with anybody because people will think I'm crazy. And then he started flooding us with beautiful, wonderful, most wild, impractical ideas. So, and it's like, yeah, there is
The door opened.
yeah, because there might be some cultural restrictions to reflection, like that not some cultures have more space for reflection than others, but it doesn't mean that we have different propensity for reflection in human beings.
No, not at all. And I'll offer this in reflection to that. My wife's from St. Petersburg, and so we've had this period of adjusting to cultural memes that are embedded that we really didn't realize were there until we have these moments in conversation where we're reflecting and we're talking about, you know, really deep stuff, and a lot of times it's somewhere in the realm of quantum physics, right? Which for most Americans that would seem just like really bizarre. It's like, why are you going there? Well, it's enjoyable because it gets you to think about how you're interacting, not just with yourself, but with others and with nature and the planet, right? So it's that kind of depth, and it's been seen as this metaphysical mumbo jumbo for a long time because it wasn't articulated correctly. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm totally with you. And this also made me think about how, like, in the context of us being co-creators of our social reality, as I discovered for myself during my master's studies, it's like, how can we create this reality in a way that uses our mutual understanding for creating something we all can share and be part of, rather than understand each other in order to create relationships that meet like my criteria or my client's criteria. So how can we really design realities that will honor our differences, cultural differences, but also connect us on a very deep human level? That was the other path, I would say, that eventually led me to what I do now.
Okay. And that's that inner side, right? Mm-hmm. Because as human beings, I think our core is we long for connection, we long for community, and we long to find some kind of harmony in that. And that doesn't mean utopia, right? That almost, it's almost like an effective management of chaos, or when you're dealing with something or someone, working through those tender moments where you're not quite sure you're understanding each other, and then moving towards a more collaborative, open space, as opposed to being in a competitive place, which is where your business dealings had been before this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I guess the third part is that I was noticing in my social reality at the time this mechanism of people reinforcing things that they don't like in the system, because they're forced by the system to do things that reinforce those things. And I felt it's totally crazy. And it reminded me of a book I read when I was about 15 years old by Miguel Ángel Asturias, El Señor Presidente. And that was based on the Guatemala in the 1920s, as far as I remember, under dictatorship. So it's fiction, but it was, based on the author's experience with that dictatorship. And the patterns that he described there, I started recognizing some of those patterns. And I recalled this book, and it was a fascinating book, but it didn't offer any ways to deal with that. It just described how bad things are and how they work. But I was drawn, looking for hope and looking.
Yeah, where's the way out, right?
And way out.
Point fingers all you want.
Yep.
But it's something my dad taught me when I was younger. It finally made sense when I got older. When you're pointing a finger at something, you got three pointing back at you. So don't do that unless you've got three solutions to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be a really interesting perspective, and helped me to keep my mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because exactly what you're talking. It seems like there's this kind of a trifecta of attention, intention, and interaction that takes place. And if we're putting our attention on that which we don't like, then we're reinforcing that, as opposed to creating something that kind of like Bucky, right? Create something that replaces it.
Yeah, which is totally part of it. But in addition to that, there is also institutional leverage that the system uses to push people to reinforce it, because otherwise it threatens their basic needs or survival even.
Sure.
Right. So yeah, it's and then the choices are often hard, and then good people start doing things that are not necessarily just because they cannot do it otherwise.
Right.
And
Do
yeah.
you find that in this situation that, you're speaking of what I see as a holistic picture and a holistic systems thinking regime, right? Instead of these pieces. And I had a conversation with Jeff Mishlev years ago, and he said we're kind of seeing it as these pyramidal structures with alpha males at the top that are in competition with each other. So in that transition, how do you see the effectiveness of this advancement towards holistic thinking in order to shed those boundaries and to remove the barriers to entry, so to speak, into a larger collective?
Yeah, it's a good question, Zen. It's I wouldn't say I think there is a one answer to that. Personally, for me, I think that I'm playing with making things as practical as possible, as down to earth as possible, because I saw some, I would say, results or consequences, I would say, of coming to this through a very either theoretical or very spiritual in a conceptual sense, not in transcendental sense, but in a conceptual sense.
Or the connectivity perspective.
Yeah, so it's like it's all vibration or things like that, right? This kind of stuff. That to me created narratives that were reductionistic in a way, because of the limitations of our mental models and our language and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So let me ask you this: when you're perceiving that, and like you say, everything's vibration. So one of the things that occurs to me is that we can't really think our way through a system built on vibration. We have to sense our way through that. Sharma does a lot of stuff with the co-presencing and co-sensing work, and I see that being reflected a lot in your work as well. The notion of how that works, and so how do you find that resonance? How do you sense your way through with what feels like the right direction to go?
Yeah. No, of course. Are
there particular
I think
things
part of it, I'm just trying to frame. I think I know exactly what I want to share, but I don't know exactly how I want to share it.
Okay.
So just what's going on is, I think that part of it is in relationship, because as soon as we are within ourselves and we're not in relationships, we're not exposing ourselves to different people and tuning in with different people, we tend to create the worlds or descriptions of our own and get stuck with them. And actually, and then we end up thinking that we're supposed to do something when actually we just invented it in our heads, and it comes out of a place that is not very.
It's like fears. Most of them are created, and none of them are rarely manifest. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that it's a very healthy practice to actually talk to people and be with people, and in different settings, and in professional setting and personal setting, and in both, and in different people, right? So, and I enjoy doing that. I think it's a fantastic practice. And yes, of course, there is also this time with yourself. But this time with yourself, to me, it's very important for the work. I enjoy being with myself, right? I had a cottage in the woods in Russia where I spent months, sometimes not months, but 1 or 2 months in the summer when I was studying at school, and so just enjoying walking in the woods and things like that.
That sounds like an amazing space.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I like my quiet space, and then I like to be with people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but also you see, so and I need that to recharge, right?
Sure,
But
absolutely.
at the same time, in my work, I feel that it's essential for me to be in relationship. And I would be very worried for myself. I would see as a red flag when I'm spending too much time on my own or with myself when I'm addressing something that involves other people. That's what I would say. Make sense?
Yes, it does. So you're looking at the balance between your contemplation of being with people and actually being with them.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also this, this I shared with you when we were preparing for this talk, right? So that I have my own story about transcendental versus constitutive domains. I think that could be helpful to understand this kind of
Sure.
practices as well. The Institute for Evolutionary Leadership and the work that Manuel was doing long before he met me is based on a very constitutive way of looking at things. Which means that this is a humanistic, materialistic way of looking at things, right? So we are like the consciousness is a property of our biology and things like that, right? So that school of thought.
Right.
And I personally do not consider myself a materialist. And I was brought up in the Russian Orthodox tradition, and I do not consider myself a materialist. But I find it very healthy to work, including work with people within the constitutive domain.
Well, you have to understand your audience and work with them as to where they're at before you can take them anywhere.
And to me, this is not just understanding the audience. This is not just being accepted by others. This is about my personal psychological hygiene in a way.
Okay. All right.
And to me, this is very important personally to be in the constitutive domain when I think about my systems change work. Because
right.
very often what we, our relationship with the transcendental, from my personal perspective, I'm not saying that this is how things are. I'm saying that this is my assessment of that, my personal assessment of that, is that there is a danger that's very, very high to take your own interpretations as a sign, as externalize your own inner workings of your subconscious mind or your interpretations, to externalize that and feel that somebody else is telling you what to do, or you're meant to do certain things, right? And the story that I have about that is that, when I was about 15 years old again, I saw a dream. And in that dream, I was in that cottage in the woods, and I was completely on my own, and I was enjoying, the sun rays actually, on the longest day of the year. It was like completely beautiful. I took a few pictures and was like really enjoying that.
During white nights.
Yep. And then I went to bed, and I went to bed like I was, I just not even bed. I was just laid down and dressed as my forced attire and stuff like that. And I woke up in that dream with exactly the same stuff, right? So I realized that I was dreaming, and I was totally in control of what I was doing in that dream. And then in that dream, I was doing a lot of exciting and very important work that I don't remember, but I was doing a lot of great stuff. And there was this one place I was coming to in between those exciting things that I was doing. And it's a lake, and there is a little bit of a hill. And on that hill, there is a very interesting red building. It's a red building that looks a little bit like a medieval castle, but with large windows. And I was like, my thought process was, oh my God, like medieval castles should have small windows for protection. Like, why does it have this?
Right. Monkey mind takes over. Right.
Yeah. So, and I remember that building, right? And that was, this, and then people were walking on that hill. So it was not like a lonely place, but that was a very calm place of reflection and contemplation. And in 2012, when I came to Oakland, like 6 a.m. in the morning, I'm coming to Oakland to look at the apartment we're going to rent. and I'm walking from the station to just randomly, I have a few hours on my own to just, I love like exploring the city.
Sure.
And I don't have a map on me because I want to just explore it wildly. And I go to Lake Merritt and I see the lake and I see the hill and the building that's exactly from that dream. And that's exactly the place where my family and I like we live just a few blocks from that lake. And that's where we actually have our walks together when we have this free time in between the very intensive work I'm doing. Well, there are two interpretations of that story. And there is one interpretation of that story. Well, Fyodor, you saw a prophetic dream when you were 15 years old, right? So you're meant to be in Oakland. You're meant to be doing the work you're doing. There is something special about it. Right? So this is one interpretation. So interpretation number two, according to Harvard research, our brain stores memories in specific points, right? And we reconstruct the details that are completely irrelevant to what we actually experienced in the past, based on different mental models we have, based on how we feel in the moment, based on our anticipations, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it's just like one of the examples in that, there's this book, Stumbling on Happiness, about that thing. One of the examples is that, for example, you go to a restaurant and you don't like the restaurant. A couple of months after that, somebody asks you, why didn't you like that restaurant? And you say like the food was not tasty, the waiters were rude, and you can kind of even remember the details of how they were rude and how untasty the food was. And in fact, if somebody asked you in the moment, you would have said, I just have a headache. So, and this is how our memories could be distorted. So the second interpretation of the story, yes, that I had a dream, because it was not something that I remembered in 2012. I actually was recalling this dream throughout. So it was an important dream. I was recalling it throughout. There was a dream, I'm pretty sure about it. And there probably was a red building and a lake. But but like statistically, how how often can we see a red building in a lake? Pretty often. And in this case, it was a pivotal time in my life when I was relocating to the city of Oakland, and I was about to embark on a certain very exciting journey, and very uncertain and difficult journey as well, but also very exciting. And I saw a red building and a lake, and the details were reconstructed to make the exact match. You see what I mean, right? And I prefer the second interpretation of the story without denying the potential ontological validity of the first interpretation. Because I think it's much healthier to live your life and to do the work and to actually, make stuff happen and interact with people and be in community together when you have the second interpretation, not the first one. Does that make sense?
It does. And yet, for the experience side of it, it happened. It gave you the core experience of joy, resonance, feeling like you were in the right place at the right time. And so this sense of energy that is consistent, or was consistent, with the sense that you had in your dream, right? Here's a similar field, if you will, of electromagnetic frequencies that matched that brought all of it up. And the bottom line is, you're there, you experienced it. It meant something to you. And we tend to want to dissect everything in order to understand it, rather than just accepting it for what it is and not needing that. Of course, we always want to know, right? We want to know how things work. Well, maybe there's, yet something else that we don't understand that might have something to do with quantum physics or quantum entanglement, where there was this certain path that you were on, that because of how you were thinking and feeling, it created, again, you're talking about co-creation. We do this with reality too, right? So you co-created this path, not knowing who all you were working with at the time in order to do so, but you found it and it appeared and you paid attention, and the intention was to have the interactions to continue your life forward in the best way possible. So these kinds of elements, I think we often, we don't need to analyze them like we do, but we certainly don't give them the credence that they deserve. And we all have these kinds of things, in my opinion, but like you said earlier, that we're kind of reluctant to talk about them because it makes this seem, a little wacky. And yet these are the very things that build these interrelationships with each other, because it's a kind of a, maybe not a completely shared experience, but definitely a shared understanding of the kind of experience it is. Right?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you that from the experience side, these things are very important. So I'm not trying to devalidate the role of that experience. I'm just trying to say that considering it an experience, that, I mean, and if you take the second interpretation of the story, this does not make the episode less meaningful.
Not
it just
at all.
makes it more personal and less transcendental, right? Or like not transcendental at all. It's like, well, for me, it feels like I'm doing the right thing. And to your question about where is my inner compass and how do I sense things within myself, this is one of the stories that illustrates how I do that, right? So it does come through synchronicity, big time, right? And it does come through filling in the right place with the right people, I would say, right? And if there is attention, sitting with attention and being present with attention until the answer comes.
Right.
Right.
And that's a tough one to do. That's really a tough one to do, because most of us want to answer the questions we have with the knowledge that we think will, which is whatever we have, but we wouldn't have the question, if we knew. Or we might, but it does lead us to a deeper interrogation and inquiry as to the mechanisms, the practicalities, the math and science that are involved. Because when you have these kinds of things, reality of the universe, it unfolds the math and science to us when we ask the right questions. And
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we tend to want to compete with the universe.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't know about collaboration.
Yeah. It reminds me an example, again, staying within the constitutive domain. I'm just trying to say that actually when we do practical things, there is no contradiction really in two descriptions.
It's designed to be
talking about the same thing from So, and it's me, this idea of a connection with example by Brian Arthur from Santa Fe University, from Santa Fe Institute, that he gave in his book, The Nature of Technology. When they, as far as I remember, they ran this computer experiment with very simple operators being combined randomly by the machine. And they also knew where this wants to go. And they taught the system to remember when these random combinations yielded something that gets them one step closer or several steps closer to where they want to get. And then whenever there is this random combination that actually gets them one step closer to where they want to get, they taught the system to remember it and add it back to random combinations. And consistently within a couple of days, the machine created a code for 8-digit calculator, which like the probability of this program being like emerging from just random combinations without memory and the vision is it's less than 1 divided by the number of the particles in the universe. So it's practically 0. And as soon as you have, you have a purpose, I would say, right? And you have the memory, you have the sensitivity of what random combinations can bring you closer to the purpose, and you kind of remember them. You have the memory to remember them and add back to these combinations. It's math, right? Or like it's statistics. It's basically like very. It's not there's nothing transcendental about it. If you look at it this way, it's just a computer and how the computers and random things work. And this reminds me of how I actually learned about the work that Manuel was doing, is that I made a big mistake at some point. There was the first program that my organization in Russia was doing with Moscow University. It's a big deal for me. We invited international experts on China, and one of them was an American expert. And I was taking personal care of like negotiating with him and making sure that our folks booked the hotel and the flight and everything for that particular date, like half a year in advance. And when the date came, I realized that I was stupid because it was Russian Orthodox Easter. It was Russian Orthodox Easter in the 2000s. It was not the Soviet Union, right? So nobody would come to a Sunday lecture by anybody if it's on a Russian Orthodox Easter. And he was going to do some classes on Saturday and Sunday. So I ended up paying him a lot of money out of my pocket to show him Moscow on that day. So we adjusted the program, obviously, and we did that. But that was a space where we actually just enjoyed each other's company and conversations about life instead of him teaching, to our students. And, I showed him the red square and all that stuff. And he mentioned an executive coach that was a pivotal at some stage in his life. And at that point, for me, it was just part of his story, very, very interesting, had nothing to do with me particularly. And then at some point, actually relatively soon, I was sending him an email asking for a connection with that coach. And after a few sessions, she said, read that book about Adam Kahane, like by Adam Kahane, Solving Tough Problems. And I read that book, and I read the next book, and I read about the project that Manuel was working on in Colombia with Santos, who later became president of Colombia. And that was the first time I discovered for myself scenario planning, multi-stakeholder dialogue. And to me, that was connected to this idea of bringing people together with different cultures, different worldviews, and creating something that actually they shared, like they owned. And also, it's about co-creating social realities, because one of the examples is really bringing people together in South Africa after the apartheid, right? So it's like, yeah, this is a macro stuff, and this is also very personal stuff, and this is fascinating. I had no idea people were doing this, and that's how I connected with the chairman of Freest Partners at the time, Jeff Barnum, and then I went to East Coast, studied with Peter Senge. That was around that time when you see all the Stanford, Chicago booth and other stuff. And I had about a year to actually explore what is going on, who's doing what. And Manuel and I were connected by 3 people independently. Like they were like, Manuel, you need to connect. You need to connect.
Yeah, it was so much for 6 degrees. More like 2 or 3.
And eventually he saw me. None of these people actually made it. So we did connect because he saw me speak at Impact Hub Oakland, and I mentioned Adam Kahane. He said, I worked with Adam, let's have lunch. And we had a 4.5-hour conversation, and on that day decided to work together right away. So you see, that is, to me, this goes back to things that were tabled back then. And it's not that something meant to happen, it's just something was resonating with it so much that even things like mistakes or random stuff allowed for possibilities to be noticed and remembered and embodied and built upon, that eventually led to the founding of the Institute, which was your very first question today.
Right. And, you've given a perfect example of how paying attention with that inner intention of fulfilling, I've come to call it a perfected form, fit, and function in the world, right? Where you're in your optimal flow with the skill sets that you have, the direction you want to go. And, it may not necessarily be a destiny, and it may be that, this whole free will thing, you choose, right? And so you've made the choices to be available, to be attentive, and to interact in order to further this cause, which is greater than you. And I think that's one of the key aspects of it, is all of us that are working in this field of attempting to create a better world, we realize that, we're all in it together. We're all connected. It's just figuring out, and for me, I'm going to dive off the cliff for just a moment and reflect on an event. For me, I was 18 instead of 15, but I had the question of what is truth, and I was in pre-med program at Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana. And the truth for me was, how does this work and how do I fit in? Right. And so be careful what you ask. I actually had the intention and I was willing to die for it if necessary. I was that intent. And so, a week later, I'd come back from class, I'd lay across my bed and do the obligatory, afternoon meditation. And this was 1975. I heard this voice that I'd been familiar with since I was a child. And it said, my given name's Bruce. It said, Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in? And I clamped up for a minute, thinking, oh my God, what do I believe in? And, Christ consciousness was the first thing, felt a little empty, didn't question it, just let it go. Cosmic consciousness came up as the next thought. And I thought, that feels full because that's like everything, right? And so I said, yes. And at that point, there was music that was playing that had a guitar riff that sounded like a rocket ship taking off that helped to facilitate an out-of-body experience, or at least the beginning one. And I popped out, turned to look at my body laying across my bed, turned to look and then turned back to look where I was going, and was immediately engulfed by white light. Now, this is just an incredible, right, experience. And I all of a sudden realized I could think, so I knew I wasn't dead. So that took that off the table. No more fear, right? And because there was nothing else there but the white light, I got bored really quickly, and I asked if there was more. And I felt this movement, went into a sphere of pinpoints of light. I knew they were points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I wasn't sure because I knew I wasn't. And then this voice picked back up again and basically says, these are those that you're to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement. Have faith and trust that everything that you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then this energy comes through again, and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air. Now, for an 18-year-old, that was a pretty intense experience, but it left me with understanding that, yeah, we're all in this, where consciousness is condensed into these forms, and there's a lot of stuff in between, but we're not disconnected from it. We just need to figure out how it all works, what we need to do, the right questions to ask, and how to create this co-creative space so that we can work together and create a better world. And, I'd given up on it until 2019 when COVID hit. It was like, oh my God, here it is. Right? I figured I'd have to be 150 before it would start. And I admit that, even divulging that now in this space is kind of out there. But this was just relating a real experience for me. And hopefully I've done it well, because that's part of what brought us together. Mm-hmm. Right, is that intention to just be available and help facilitate. There's no real leadership in this because it seems to be all self-initiated with what we have in this internal process of wanting to be present and participatory in developing better systems. Mm-hmm. And it's surprising how ubiquitous this is now with all the different organizations that are coming up, with all the different people now. And of course, this is 45 years later from my experience. So, it basically took that long for the universe to say, okay, here's, we're setting everything up and people are getting in place. And so now what I saw, and this is from where I see it, these points of light that I saw there are now coming and reflecting in people like you and Manuel and the folks in the discussions that we've been having together and those kinds of things. There's a real resonance in my core that has that sense. Now, talking about that, right? To just anybody in public and things like that, they'd probably think I was kind of nuts. But, there's this history that we have and that you have that you can relate it to, okay, this is my process. I know my process. Others may not understand it. They don't need to, mm-hmm. right? It's my process, right? Mm-hmm. And yet here we're all sharing these similar processes. And this is kind of what I hope to draw out as a golden thread with One World and a New World. It is the similarities of which we approach things and the kind of the place that we end up in sensing a new normalcy in this experience collectively.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I totally hear
Well, the
you.
practicality, it is, what are we doing? Who are we doing it with? What are the results we're accomplishing? What are the metrics we're using to prove it? How can we reflect on that? How can we use those statistics then in order to say, okay, here's what we've done, here's the proof. Now what? What's next? And how can we integrate this process into a larger picture? And I think this is what you're doing with the transformational leadership series.
Yeah, and here just a quick comment on that one. Even if you put the metaphysics for a while, it doesn't become any easier or simpler, because within the constitutive domain, there is complexity that is very constitutive, but it's still fascinating. And one of the things, for example, that I formulated for myself in terms of impact assessment of systems change work, it's similar to the Heisenberg's principle, right? The Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but it's right. Either you can measure where the particle is, or the direction speed in which it is going, as far as I remember. But the thing is that with the systems change, you can either identify and separate the direct consequences of your actions, or you can sense the evolution of the system. You can never connect the two. You can never connect the two. Because as soon as you focus your attention to what it is that you're doing that leads to measurable outcomes that you can present without having the attribution problem, you lose the grasp of the unified whole of the system evolution. But as soon as you connected that system evolution, yes, you're dancing with it, you're doing something, you're part of it. Absolutely. But it's not that you can say, oh, I am changing that system. No, you're not.
No, the system, infinite intelligence, or the intelligent design, or however you want to call it, it has its own inner workings, and we're just kind of actors on the stage that show up to participate as best we can. But you're right.
But I would make a distinction between interpreting us as agents of some external forces versus us as participants, in codependent relationships. So that's what the second
interdependent
is what I mean, right? So instead of just having, because there's one worldview which is transcendental, that there is a purpose or a guiding force that is determining things that need to happen, and we are only transmitting the message or doing the work that has been designed before us or for us. And this is not where I'm coming from in this particular area. What I am, how I interpret it is, at least like in my work, the basic premise behind my work regarding this is that we are like an ontological design theory, right? So we are active co-creators of the social reality, but none of us can single-handedly keep this reality in place or transform it, right? It is an act of co-creation, and also by designers. Like if somebody is saying like, oh my God, like what do you guys think of yourselves as change agents or designers of systems? Like, who are you? Who the hell are you, right? And it's like, yeah, you are a co-designer of a system, and I'm a co-designer of our social realities. And everybody, we're just, most of the time, we're not aware of that, because as Manuel likes to say, we cannot give up this job. We're designers by nature. We're in it. Let's admit it. And let's just do something about it. Let's be careful what we design together, right? And at the same time, it's not a one-person job. It's a collective job. And that's what I mean. Like, you either can watch your own action and try to make assessments of your actions, or you can make assessments and sense where the collective is going. And there is a relationship. What you do matters for the collective, and what the collective does matters for you, but you can never determine a cause and effect relationship between the collective evolution and your actions.
What I find is that taking that to the next level is that understanding your skill set your intention. You're looking for a place to fit in, and it's like you're a thread in the tapestry. You're just looking to find where your entrance point is, right? And then the tapestry takes over from there because you're part of it, and your specific skill set, intelligence, understanding, capability, talent, all of those kinds of things fit in that perfectly once you begin to engage it, because you're all in, right? There's no leaving part of you behind to see how things work, right? You've got to commit, and when you commit, everything else comes together around that, and everything else, including other people, places, things, and you're working on, while simultaneously, like Robert Gilman was saying, you're working on this harmony of self, others, or within self, others, and nature, right? And that's this new regenerative aspect that we're beginning to look at, which is a more holistic picture, and then how we can design these new systems, and it may just be a redesign of the existing systems with just a little tweak here and there, because they are working. Even in the material world, everything's being delivered, or pretty much, those systems are in place. They may not work to capacity or as effective as they can, but that's this next layer, right? Where we're thinking about it differently, and we're looking at things at the same things with different eyes. I kind of call it the thoughtmosphere, right? Where there's this thing of circular thinking, right? Where you're looking at the same middle section from different perspectives. Well, as Mansi was saying even today, that there's this spherical view where you've got multiple places that you can see it from, and it's not necessarily a woo-woo thing. It's a dimensionally specific type of thing through the electromagnetic spectrum, because we're not separate from it either. It's all energy, it's all vibration. So we just don't consider those things because we've just been with this, I don't want to say two-dimensional, but three-dimensional model, that we don't understand the greater aspects of what we can do as co-creators, and that we're designed to be this way, right? And what's been inhibiting us, are things like this, the fallacious narrative that we've been thrust into over the last year or so, and what it's caused, and good, bad, or indifferent, it's been an accelerator, right? It's caused people to action, and those who are not being driven to action may not need to be, right? Where we think, everybody needs to be moving in this direction. No, there's a division of labor, and there's only, so many places that need to be filled in order for the work to get done, and everybody doesn't have to be there. That goes back to the skill sets and the aptitude and attitude and all that kind of stuff. So how do you see your work being reflected in the world now, and what kind of results are you seeing of the effectivity?
Yeah, well, that ties to the idea that you can either see direct impact of your actions, that is pretty much not at systems level, or you can actually make some assessments about where the system is. Of course, like we did the work, like we do a program, or we do some kind of participatory engagement, and we I write policy briefs and stuff like that, and then you can kind of sense, like, okay, so people like the work, or some things emerged from that engagement, or the project started emerging. Of course, like this is one type of things that we can sense at a community level, for example, right? But at the same time, looking at the field at large, right, I see a lot of changes, and I like to think that the work that we are doing, along with the work that thousands of people are doing in many different places, that our work is in alignment with produces these results collectively, right? Our contribution is very, very small, which is exactly how it should be. It would be really bad, actually, I think, if our contribution was very large. Like, I don't know, like somebody would be a supreme commander of the global social evolution. That would be terrible, right? So yeah, it's nice actually that our contributions are small. It's just, I love it this way, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
and then in the field, over the last maybe even 2 or 3 years, I sense a lot of progress in a way. And even like right now, I'm a participant in 2 programs. One with International Futures Forum, Graham Lester and Maureen O'Hara, Competence and Complexity, and you know, I admire their work since many years ago, like 2012 actually, and I'm happy to be there and talk with people all around the world who are doing that. But in parallel with that, I'm enrolled in a university in Russia to do a systems change program in Russian language, done by some friends of mine who went to masters for Master of Leadership for Strategic Sustainability program in Sweden.
Hence the policy.
No, it's not a policy. It's a wonderful program that's
Okay.
that is connected to the art of hosting community, and you know, all the good stuff. I have like
Okay.
some mentors and good friends from that program in America and in other places. And I'm co-authoring a chapter with several people, including a graduate from this program in Chile. So it's a really like an influential program in the world. So, but then actually some Russians took it, and one of them happened to graduate from the same Institute of Asian and African Studies of Moscow University that I did. That's how we kind of initially got connected. And, you know, they are now doing a program, which is 1/3 of a master's program. It's like one module of a future master's program, hopefully, for Russians in Russian about systems change. Look, Zen, if several years ago I would be speaking about systems change in Russian language, people would say, like, what the hell are you talking about? And right now they have 17 amazing participants from different sectors actually learning this stuff. And not just learning, but bringing the wealth of experience. And they have embodied experience, many of them at least, they have embodied experience of this, and they're finding the language finally to talk about that. And I see leaders, grassroots leaders in Kenya, I see grassroots leaders in Greece, grassroots leaders in different states of the United States of America. And some of them have been talking about this for years, and some of them have been doing this for years, but are now finding language and connecting and learning from each other, partially because of the technology, partially because of the evolution of narratives. And also, now then, pair that with the fact that, for example, the G20 presidency agenda, the Italian presidency agenda, includes systemic crisis as part of the official priorities of G20 leaders. And they have there the notion that we cannot go to the normal that we had before the crisis, that we need to reinvent systems. Of course, there is a lot of stuff happening on the high level in politics that is degenerative, and this is limiting. And of course, a lot of these things might be just talk, no action, or some kind of misinterpretations. That's part of life. But I can tell you that I see the progress in actually at least embracing some of the language and connections and practices in places where they were not welcome even a few years ago. So I see that shift on a larger scale. And also I see some very nice friendships emerging from my local, or like not local, but very down to earth, very limited in a good way work, and results that are that I hope are contributing to that larger picture as well. Let me just pause there.
No, I would say from my place, they are, because you're seeing it, right? And you are doing things, you're engaged, and I see things similar. And I also believe that, you know, there's this notion that time is a measurement of the change of entropy. And as we decrease entropy, that means that change will take less time because it's in better flow or resonance or even harmony with what needs to be. because there's this, the idea of, the earth being conscious, and we're learning to work with that consciousness. We're learning that, our consciousness is a lot more than what we thought it was to begin with. There's lots of things that have come out and from both science and esoteric sides that are proving the same thing. Matter of fact, there was a woman that was a doctor that was doing a dissertation, Russian, who was going over the recent scientific findings about how this spiritual concept of connectedness actually can be proven scientifically. And it was amazing. It just came out a few months ago, and my wife brought it to my attention. Has English subtitles, so it made it even better for me. But these kinds of things are relevant. They're progressing, and they're present. And when one begins to look around, and of course that's the key feature, you have to raise your head up and from the grindstone, so to speak, and look around and see who else is there, and just notice that. And it's like walking into a room full of people and noticing who you have eye contact with instantly. Mm-hmm. Right, and connecting those dots and following that flow. One last question that I want to ask: on a daily basis, is there something that you do that thinks, or that you believe, or that helps you to stay in touch and be available for your own progression, that you might be able to share with others for them to maybe play around with and see if it works for them?
Yeah. First of all, I must admit here that I have a lot of work to do specifically on my scheduling skills and making strategic arrangements for enough sleep. So which is something that this is the edge of my personal development practice, I would say, because it does impact the presence, the ability to be present, and the ability to connect with your inner compass when you are just working mm-hmm. like crazy and don't have space to, right? So this is not something that I successfully practice at the level that I love, but this is something I'm striving to do, and I'm encouraging others to try that too, if they need that to try, unless they already master that. So this is one thing. Another thing is obviously disrupt the normal flow of things. If there is something that is, I don't know, like you feel like you're caught in certain patterns that are not helping, just do something different. I don't know, it could be very easy lifestyle stuff, like, I don't know, like cancel that call, go for a walk, or like, I don't know, play a board game with the daughter, or things like that. Oh, by the way, that's my battery. Yep. So yeah, this is a great illustration, I think, of like, yeah, battery needs to be recharged, because if battery is not recharged, then you end up with your avatar, and your avatar is not necessarily how you feel or how you're present. So yeah, so disrupt the flow. And then finally, I'm blessed to have a very good family, and we support each other, and that helps a lot. So just having relationships either with your family or your friends or with someone else would be another thing I would mention.
Great. Well, Fyodor, wonderful conversation. Obviously, technology said, okay, you guys are done. And we have come to a close anyway, in perfect timing, or near perfect anyway. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for it.
Wonderful. It's my pleasure, Zen. Thank you so much, and looking forward to more interviews that you'll do with some amazing people here.
I hope, I long for that, actually, and I'll have so much fun. And I'll have information about your contact information, the Institute, and things that will roll in the credits afterwards. So thanks again, and thank you for watching One World in a New World. We'll see you next time.